Hello, 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 everyone. I know I am tuning in a little bit late tonight. I'm even a day late because our Teaching Tip Tuesday is coming to you on Wednesday today and not Tuesday. I missed yesterday because I was actually getting these done and it took about 6 hours. So apologies, but I am here tonight. And what I want to talk to you about tonight is how the different ways that we can create more equitable opportunities for students in the classroom when it comes to grading practices. And these relate to the ways that teachers can implement anti-racist grading practices. What this means is implementing bias resistant and motivational practices that really can improve the learning outcomes of students and enhance the relationships that teachers have with their students. So you might be wondering what bias grading looks like, or what biases look like with grading. It pretty much boils down to when the grades that students receive represents everything, even factors outside of the actual score or grade that they get, right? And so when that grade represents everything, there's a lot of room for biases to come into play. So what the research says is that grades cannot encompass everything. It can't encompass like students' behavior, students' ability to meet deadlines, students' mastery of the content, students' participation, their effort, their attendance, their neatness, their professionalism, and the list can go on. It cannot encompass everything because that's when there's so much room for biases when all of those things come into play. So what we have to how we kind of confront that is by considering, real life obstacles and opportunities for students to grow that can come into play, right? So we have to think about, if a student is not participating verbally in class, well, what does that mean? That could be a cultural or religious reason. Or if students are not completing homework on time, it could relate to a home life issue. So we have to consider real life obstacles, things that happen to the students, things that are part of the students' culture that might come into play that affects all of the things that are aligned to what grading looks like in your setting. So when implementing, the idea of bias resistant and motivational grading considerations, this really can shift the culture of the classroom. It can create a safe space for students to really showcase their learning, to really show how they are mastering the content and the concepts that you're teaching, and really provide an opportunity for students to have choice, have voice, and have authenticity in the learning space. So before I share the 3 tips with you, I want to call out that the information from our conversation tonight was adapted from Shane Safir and Jamila Dugan. They have a book about anti-racist grading practices. So let's talk about 3 ways teachers can implement more equitable grading practices. So tip number 1 is to build rubrics with the students, right? So, whenever possible, allow the students to have a voice. And of course, with rubrics, it gives them a choice. So you're giving them the opportunity to have a voice in the scoring descriptions. Of course, you have your standards, but you're allowing them to have a voice in the scoring descriptions and how their performance and progress will be assessed. Okay, so they get to have an input in what they would like to accomplish for the activity. They may even come up with descriptions and wording for the different criterion that are part of your rubric, and their wording may be more understandable and clear to them and their peers than maybe what we would have come up with. So an example of this could be maybe you're creating a writing rubric for, a writing assignment or an essay, where you can ask the students, what makes a good topic sentence? What makes good supporting details? What makes a good conclusion? What makes, whatever else you want to ask with the writing process. And you could even ask them, well, what does not make a good blank, right? And so with them providing their input on that, you can use all of that information to craft your rubric categories and descriptions for, for that assignment, and the students' voices are heard in those descriptions. So ultimately, students get to weigh in on the value placed on how they will be assessed. All right, so that was tip number one, to build rubrics with the students. Tip number two is to incorporate student conferencing. Students can lead conferences with their peers, with the parents, or with the teacher, or they can, you can guide them, you can provide guidance to them with a rubric to have structured peer conferences. So ultimately, students are taking charge of their learning when they are in their conferences, because they are sharing confidently about their learning progress, and they're even getting to show evidence with the artifacts that they choose of their learning. These conferences, like I said, could be, with the teacher and the student, it could be with the student and their parents, and it could even be the students and their peers. But when the students are working with their peers, they're going to need a little bit more structure and guidance than if they were working with you or with the parents. So you may have to give them some kind of a rubric or guide, so they know what to share, and they know how to give each other feedback. So use strategies to help them give feedback, like the tag strategy, for example. So another thing to consider is when you're doing these conferences, if parents cannot come to the school, you can leverage technology. If they cannot attend the conferences with their, with their child, you can use technology and do it via Zoom, right? You can also have the students record using tools like Microsoft Flip, and they can record their conference session and share that with the parents via Microsoft Flip. And you could even take that a step further and have the parents respond to their children on Microsoft Flip, because on Microsoft Flip, the students records the video, and then the parents can actually reply in a video or written response as well. So, it can be done without the parents being physically there, and technology can be leveraged for that. Okay. I remember as I was, kind of thinking about the conferencing, I remembered doing this for my daughter when she was in her early elementary years. I remember going and sitting at those little tiny desks and, watching her walk to the cabinet, the file cabinet, to pull out her manila folder. And then she brought her manila folder over, and then she picked out like a couple worksheets that she had completed. And then she started to tell us all about, my husband and I, all about, what she was learning in math and in science as she was going over those worksheets. And she even worked out some tough math problems for us to see her go through the process. At the end, the teacher had like a little paper for us to fill out where we could reflect on the conferencing experience. And it was like 2 stars and a wish. So we gave her input on 2 things that she did well, and the wish, would be something that was something that we wanted to see more of. And so we gave her that feedback written. So she added that to her manila folder and took it back to the cabinet. So I definitely appreciated that experience as a parent, for sure, because, I felt good seeing my daughter being able to talk about her learning with such joy and, such confidence. And I definitely appreciated that experience as a teacher, because you can, you see how students are able to really shine when given the opportunity, right? So it was definitely a celebration of learning. And we got ice cream after to celebrate. All right, so number three, so tip number two was about conferencing, student conferencing specifically. Tip number three is to reevaluate, not do away with, reevaluate grading homework. Okay. Why? Because homework should be low stakes. It should not be a punishment. It should be about practicing the skills learned in class, right? The new skills that are learned in class, practicing them. It should not be graded or, graded with high stakes in mind. It should help students get a better handle on what they learned in class, because that way they can use notes and information from class to guide them as they're completing these homework practices. If students have to turn to outside resources to figure out what they must do with their homework, this can present and will present challenges for some students who may not have access to certain types of resources to complete the homework. And of course, the result will be them not completing the homework, but guess what? It's also going to impact their grades negatively. So they're going to suffer twice, right? So the recommendation is to reevaluate how you grade homework. Again, I want to be clear. I am not saying that I don't think and expect students should have work or work should be done at home. There should be work done at home. Okay, so there should be work done at home, but I want you to think about some of these questions when it comes to your approach with homework. What is the purpose of your homework assignments or the tasks that you're having students complete at home? How much are the parents involved in the homework process? Do you grade every single thing when it comes to homework? Do you grade for accuracy only? How much does homework count towards the students' overall grades? And, does the homework add to the class experience? Meaning, is it like a continuation of like a project or a creative assignment they're doing? And really, do students get punished for not completing homework? So those are just some of the questions to consider as you think about how you can reevaluate your homework process and grading homework so that it is equitable for all students to be able to participate. Okay, so we talked about 3 tips for more equitable opportunities regarding grading. The first one was building rubrics with the students. The second one was incorporating student conferencing. And the third one was reevaluating grading homework. So I am curious to find out what other strategies you may have implemented or you're thinking about implementing to create those equitable opportunities for your students. We would love to hear from you. So drop your comments in the chat, or you can also go to LCT-E or the link in the bio to connect with us and see just how we work with teachers on topics just like these. So have a great evening. Thank you for listening and see you next time. Bye.